Hi, I'm Jeff, and welcome to A Million Movies. And did you know that Michael Caine, the star of the 1969 classic The Italian Job, which features one of the best car chase scenes in movie history, did not know how to drive when that movie was being made? Now, to be precise, Caine started taking driving lessons while the movie was being shot, but he never got comfortable enough behind the wheel where we ever actually see him drive a car on screen. In fact, the only time his character drives in the movie is when he picks up his Aston Martin from the garage and drives over to a hotel. In both shots, whenever we see Michael Caine's character, the car never moves, and in every other scene for the rest of the movie, Michael Caine was always a passenger. And that's just the first of 50 facts about one of the greatest heist movies ever made that I'm going to be racing through today. So fasten your seatbelts because we're about to blow the bloody doors off The Italian Job.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off!
While The Italian Job helped define the heist movie genre, the idea for the movie was originally pitched as a television show not set in Italy, but set in London. However, once the creators realized that the scope of the production would be too much for a British television show's budget, they began reworking the story into a feature film instead. But if you're like me and would still love to see a weekly TV series about a gang of robbers driving Mini Coopers around town, don't give up hope just yet. NBC has been kicking around the idea of an Italian Job series for more than 3 years. The idea is still in development, and there's still a chance The Italian Job could make an appearance on the small screen someday. When Paramount Pictures signed on to back the production, studio chief Robert Evans originally suggested Robert Redford play the part of Charlie Croker. But Charlie Bluhdorn, who actually owned Paramount Pictures, had been a fan of Michael Caine's since Caine made Alfie for Paramount a couple of years earlier, and Bluhdorn wanted Caine in that lead role. Now, early on, the production team also wanted Peter Yates to direct the movie. Fresh off of making Bullitt the year before, the feeling was that Yates could bring that same style to The Italian Job. Once again, though, Charlie Bluhdorn stepped in and picked Peter Collinson as the director. Collinson had made The Long Day's Dying for Paramount the year before, and Bluhdorn felt he was ready to make this movie. That's not to say that Peter Collinson stayed behind the camera all the time. In addition to directing the movie, he also cast himself as a member of the gang. That's him closing the gate as the Mini Coopers exit the sewer, and that's him hanging off the back of the bus, guiding the Mini Coopers up the ramp. Now, one of the perks of having an actor like Michael Caine on the set is that he's so quick on his feet that entire scenes could be shot without a script. One example of this is the scene where Charlie goes to the garage after getting out of prison to pick up his car. Michael Caine and John Clive improvised this entire scene. The other lead role in the film is Mr. Bridger, the crime boss who controls everything from his comfortable prison cell. Screenwriter Troy Kennedy Martin wanted Nicole Williamson for that role, since he knew they needed someone who could play a tough, no-nonsense crime boss. Peter Collinson had someone else in mind, though, and offered the role to Noel Coward instead. Coward shifted the role from being the tough guy Kennedy Martin had envisioned, and made Bridger a sophisticated gentleman crook who was both loved and respected by London's criminal class. It also helped that in real life, Noel Coward was director Peter Collinson's godfather, and Collinson wanted to thank Coward for giving him his start in the business. Unfortunately, Noel Coward was suffering from arteriosclerosis during the filming of The Italian Job. His health was so poor that it impacted production. For example, Coward was having trouble remembering his lines, so to help him out, Coward's longtime companion and partner, Graham Payne, was brought in to play a new role as Bridger's assistant, so he could be on hand to help Coward get through his scenes. And one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, Bridger's triumphant march through the prison, had to be filmed in short segments since Coward was unable to walk more than a few feet at a time. In all, Noel Coward worked for 10 days on The Italian Job and earned £25,000 for his performance. When production ended, he announced his retirement from acting, making The Italian Job Noel Coward's final film credit. Now, Noel Coward wasn't the only friend or family member to land a part in the movie, though. Michael Caine's brother, Stanley Caine, appears as one of the members of the gang. And Peter Collinson's wife, Lisa Shane, was Collinson's lucky charm and appeared in all of his movies, including, of course, The Italian Job. In this film, she plays the part of the blonde wife of the visiting American gangster during the mob men's dinner. Collinson cast her for the part because the casting directors were only sending him tall, dark Italian models, and he wanted a short, blonde woman to counter the Italians in the room. One final casting note: Benny Hill plays Professor Peach, the computer expert who hacks into Turin's traffic system. Now, Benny wasn't the only star of the Benny Hill Show to appear in The Italian Job. Longtime Benny Hill Show cast member Henry McGee also appears in a cameo as Michael Caine's tailor. Of course, many would argue that the real stars of The Italian Job are not the actors, but are the Mini Coopers used in the getaway scenes. Unfortunately, British Motor Corporation, the makers of the Mini, didn't want to donate any cars for the production. Fiat, on the other hand, wanted to be involved as much as they could be. They offered to donate as many cars as were needed, including top-of-the-line Lamborghinis and Ferraris, plus $40,000 if they used Fiat 500s in place of the Minis. Peter Collinson felt that this needed to be a truly British movie, and he pushed for using Minis instead. In the end, Fiat still donated dozens of cars, as well as allowing the production to use the factory grounds. In fact, the rooftop racetrack we see during the getaway sequence was an actual working part of the Fiat Lingotto factory in Turin. Built in 1923, the track sits on top of a 5-story building that was once the workplace for 6,000 Fiat employees, and nearly 100 years later, the track is still there. Now, one line in the movie that many owners really appreciate was in the scene where Michael Caine is walking through the garage, and we hear that Roser's having trouble with his differential.
Roser's having trouble with his differential there.
Tell him to hurry up.
Hurry up.
Mini Coopers are front-wheel drive cars, so they don't have a rear differential. However, in the 1960s, most cars were rear-wheel drive, so asking a mechanic to check out a rear differential on a Mini was a popular prank to pull, and one that made it into the movie. Another thing to keep an eye out for the next time you watch The Italian Job are the license plates on the 3 Minis. The red Mini has the number HMP729G. This plate referred to Her Majesty's Prison and Charlie Croker's prison number. The white Mini is GPF146G. GPF references Grand Prix flag. And the blue Mini is LGW809G. This references the flight the gang would have taken had they been successful. LGW refers to London Gatwick, their destination, and 809 was the flight number. Now, speaking of license plates, the plate number on Mr. Bridger's limo reads HMP1, which, like the plate on the red Mini, stands for Her Majesty's Prison. Of course, prison vehicles wouldn't have personalized plates, and Daimlers would not have been used to move prisoners around, but that's all part of the fun of the movies. Now, continuing with car facts, when Michael Caine's character Charlie Croker gets out of jail, he's picked up by his girlfriend in a stolen car. She tells him the car belongs to the ambassador of Pakistan. In real life, the car they're using was actually owned by the ambassador of Pakistan at the time. And one of my favorite vehicles from the movie was the bus used to transport the gang and gold out of Turin. That's a 1964 Bedford VAL with a Harrington Legionnaire body. Now, one unique feature of this bus is that it has twin front steering axles. For filming, the bus was modified to reinforce the partition behind the driver so that the Minis wouldn't crush him as they were driven into the back. Even with that reinforcement, though, the cars did move the driver's seat forward a few inches, pushing the driver up so that his stomach touched the steering wheel. After the movie was finished, this bus went back into commercial use in Scotland before being broken down for scrap in the 1990s. Alright, some quick notes on some of the other cars used in the movie. Michael Caine's Aston Martin that we see being pushed off a cliff by the Mafia, that was a fake car. The real Aston Martin survived and can still be occasionally seen at car shows. The 2 Jaguar E-Types that were smashed in that same scene have both been restored and also make appearances at car shows from time to time. And finally, the Lamborghini Miura that we see during the opening credits was recently found in a secret car park in Paris. A collector from Wales now owns it. Note that this Miura is not the one tossed down the cliff. That one was already wrecked before it went over the edge. Now, aside from the cars, one other vehicle to take note of is the Chinese plane that brings the gold to the Turin airport. The plane is a Douglas C-74 Globemaster transport plane and is one of only 14 made. Also, those Chinese characters on the plane are basically gibberish. The characters say, "China government fly." Originally, the producers thought that Milan would be the best place to shoot the movie, but ultimately decided to shoot in Turin instead. First, they didn't think they'd get a permit to film in Milan that gave them as much freedom as they get in Turin. And second, Turin actually had the most extensive computer-controlled traffic system like the one they described in the movie. Now, that's not to say the production didn't have challenges. One drawback to shooting in Turin was that the local authorities would sometimes refuse to close the roads for filming. When that happened, reportedly, the Italian mafia would step in and cause traffic jams that shut down whole sections of the city. The result is that many of the traffic jams seen in the movie are real, including the reactions of the frustrated drivers stuck in them. There are a handful of iconic shots in the getaway chase scene. The minis going down the stairs in the palazzo is a great example. Now, getting the shot took a little bit of a lie by omission to make happen. When Peter Collinson was requesting permission to shoot in the palazzo, he only told the palazzo managers that machinery would be used on the stairs. He never told them he'd be driving cars down those steps. Another great shot was perhaps the most dangerous stunt of the entire movie, when 3 Mini Coopers jumped from one roof to another. The stunt was considered so dangerous that some of the crew members walked off the set in protest, and nearby Fiat workers made the sign of the cross for the stuntmen to bless them before they made the jump. Adding on to the stress was an Italian law that said if there was a death, the person responsible for the production would be charged with manslaughter. All that added up to a nerve-wracking day for producer Michael Dealey, but in the end, he okayed the shot, and fortunately, all 3 cars made it across safely. Now, one sequence from that final chase that didn't make the final edit was a face-off in an exhibition hall where the Mini Coopers tried to avoid the police while the Blue Danube plays. Unfortunately, the scene was cut for time, but can still be found in the DVD bonus features. That chase scene was shot throughout Turin, with the exception of the scenes in the sewer tunnel. This part of the sequence was shot in the Sow Valley sewer duplication system in Coventry, in the UK, where several miles of the Birmingham-Coventry sewer were under construction. To get those shots in the sewer, the crew mounted the camera onto a rear of another mini vehicle, a mini moke, that drove in front of the Coopers. Stunt coordinator Remy Julien was excited about shooting the sewer scenes since he wanted to complete a 360-degree barrel roll on camera. Remy tried to do the roll 3 times, but the slippery walls prevented him from getting around, and he landed the car on its roof all 3 times. Now, there are reports from other crew members that Remy did make the roll once during rehearsal, but it was never captured on film, so it's not in the final movie. Mini Coopers and the Italian Job will always be connected, and that connection is often reinforced by recreations of key scenes. For example, to mark the completion of 10 new kilometers of sewer in Hull, England in 2001, Yorkshire Water recreated the sewer scene, this time using the recently released new shape BMW Mini Coopers. Now, one note about the gold that they loaded onto those Mini Coopers. Gold cost almost $39 per ounce in 1968, so $4 million in gold bars would have weighed about 7,000 pounds. Dividing that weight up between the 3 Mini Coopers meant that each car was carrying about 2,300 pounds plus the weight of the driver and the passenger. A 1968 Mini only weighs about 1,400 pounds, so each of these vehicles would have had to carry more than 1.5 times its own weight in gold. The Italian Job has had an impact on pop culture, which I'll cover a little later on, but pop culture also had an impact on the Italian Job. Popular athletes in particular became part of the story when the gang disguised themselves as England soccer fans to get out of Turin unnoticed. Their Dormobile van is decorated with the names of popular English players from the time, including Bobby Moore, the English captain of the 1966 and 1970 World Cup squads, and photos of Alan Ball and Roger Hunt. On the driver's door is Osgood is Good, a reference to Peter Osgood, and Colin Bell's name is on the right side, along with photos of Bobby Charlton and Bobby Moore. And of course, I have to mention the soundtrack, which was composed by the great Quincy Jones. It starts off with On Days Like These, sung by Matt Monro, over the opening credits. But the most memorable song of the movie has to be Get a Bloomin' Move On, which most people simply call the Self-Preservation Society song. Now, one of the singers we hear on that song is none other than Michael Caine himself. Alright, so one of the things that I think makes The Italian Job such a fun and interesting movie is its ending, which is great since when production on the movie started, there wasn't an ending ready to go. Paramount Pictures still hadn't come up with one. A novelization of the film written by Troy Kennedy Martin and Ken Laskin ended with the bus making it into Switzerland without any issues, and 2 days later, the gang and the gold arrive on a beach near Dover in a landing craft where they're met by Mr. Bridger and Luigi Ottaviani. As they come ashore, Mr. Bridger tells Charlie Croker that they've come to an agreement to divide Europe, and that the gold must be given back to the Italians. Another ending that had been proposed was one that left open the option for a sequel. According to the DVD commentary, although never formally planned, the first movie would end with the bus teetering over the edge, and the sequel would start with the mafia arriving in helicopters and lifting the bus back onto the road, saving the gold and Charlie's gang. The rest of the movie would then involve Charlie's crew pulling a second heist to steal the gold back from the mafia. In a 2003 BBC documentary, Michael Caine revealed what Charlie's great idea was to get the bus off the edge of the cliff.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
He suggested that they would have turned the engine back on. Everyone would stay exactly where they were, but as the gasoline burned off, the rear of the bus would lighten up and the front end would come back down. The gang would then begin to move to the front of the bus and jump out all at the same time. The bus would then go over the cliff, where Caine said the mafia would be waiting, ready to recover the gold. Caine also confirmed on the Graham Norton show that the movie ended with this literal cliffhanger because censors at the time wouldn't approve a movie where the criminals successfully got away with the crime. Interestingly, The Italian Job was made right as these codes were ending, so technically that restriction wouldn't have been in place, but filmmakers still had the rules in mind and didn't want to risk getting denied. Now, Caine's version of how they would have solved the problem with the bus on the edge of the cliff is rumored to be the explanation used for one of the drafts for a sequel called The Brazilian Job. In 2008, the Royal Society of Chemistry held a competition trying to find the best science-based solution for the ending of The Italian Job that allowed the gang to keep the gold. They also prohibited the use of helicopters and required that the solution could not take more than 30 minutes to implement since, of course, the police might find them if they took longer than that. The winning entry suggested that the gang break two of the larger side windows towards the rear of the bus and let the glass fall outside the bus, and break two front windows, keeping that glass inside the bus for the extra weight. One man would then climb outside the bus and drain the fuel tank. Once it was drained enough for him to get off the bus entirely, he would then toss rocks into the front of the bus until the bus was stable. Then, the gang would hijack a passing vehicle and escape with the gold. If the solutions to the ending of The Italian Job sound difficult, just filming that final scene was as hard for the crew. The site they selected for the shot only had a single restaurant at the end of it, and on the first day of shooting, weather was great and very few cars came through. The second day was a Sunday, though, and that restaurant at the end of the road was very popular on Sundays. Pretty quickly, a long line of cars started backing up downhill from the location, and some upset drivers even broke through the roadblocks, and shooting ultimately had to be postponed for the day. And local traffic wasn't the only issue the crew had to worry about. The final shot of the movie is a helicopter shot pulling away from the bus. As they were practicing the shot, the downdraft from the helicopter started to tip the bus over. Members of the stunt crew rushed onto the set and hung onto the front of the bus to keep it from going over the edge. With the movie finally finished, it made its way into theaters, where, in the US at least, it performed poorly. Michael Caine blamed the bad box office on a misleading advertising campaign. The U.S. poster featured a scantily clad woman with a map on her back kneeling in front of a mafioso holding a machine gun. And while the movie did get a Golden Globe nomination for Best English Language Foreign Film, the ticket sales were so poor that any idea for a sequel were shelved. Even though we haven't seen a sequel, there have been two remakes of The Italian Job. The first came in 2003 and was set in Los Angeles with Mark Wahlberg as Charlie Croker and Donald Sutherland as John Bridger. The other remake is an unofficial Bollywood remake called Players, which was released in 2012. And, like the original, both remakes feature Mini Cooper chase scenes. Even with its poor US box office, The Italian Job is still a favorite for many and was voted number 36 on the BFI's 100 Greatest British Films of the 20th Century. And in a 2003 UK movie survey, Charlie Croker's line, "You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off," was voted the most memorable line in any movie. It's such a well-known and well-loved line that Michael Caine titled his third memoir, Blowing the Bloody Doors Off. Michael Caine's performance and his bloody doors line has been parodied in several British comedies over the years.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
And was even mixed into the music video for Pick a Heart That's New by Stereophonics. There's even a video game based on the 1969 film that was released in 2001, and a play performed at the 2003 Edinburgh Fringe Festival retold the story of the Italian Job using dialogue pulled from Shakespeare's plays. Music videos, video games, and stage plays aren't the only places where you can see elements of the Italian Job. Several shots from the car chase scene were even used in a MacGyver episode. And during the 2012 Summer Olympics held in London, the Bloody Doors line and a car being blown up were included as part of the closing ceremonies. Not only that, but as part of the Olympic celebration of British culture, a replica of the bus was exhibited balanced on the edge of the roof of the De La Warr Pavilion in Bexhill-on-Sea. And finally, the Italian Job has done its part for charity thanks to an annual event where minis and other vehicles featured in the original film drive from the UK to northern Italy and back to raise money for children's charities. Since 1990, the event has raised nearly £2.6 million. And there's the finish line, 50 facts about the 1969 classic, The Italian Job. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and watch some of my other episodes. In particular, you might like my video comparing Peter Yates' chase scenes in Bullet and in Breaking Away, or my deep dive into movies like The Italian Job that end with ambiguous but potentially deadly endings, a trope called a Bolivian army ending. So until next time, thanks for watching A Million Movies.